Hi there, I'm Neil McGee. I teach systems in the UVA School of Data Science. And in this webcast, I'd like to show you just the basics, kind of a visual how-to of getting set up in Git and GitHub. So the first thing we need to do is think about how to sign in from our computer, from our command line here, over into GitHub. We need some form of authentication. You can do this with SSH keys if you want. You used to be able to do it with username and password, but those are kind of insecure. So these days we use what's called a PAT, a personal access token. So the first thing we need to do is set up a token. So when you sign up to GitHub, click on your profile image up on the upper right, go 3/4 of the way down to settings, and then all the way to the bottom on the left, and you'll see developer settings. And at this point, unfold the personal access tokens section, and there's two kinds. The new version is called fine-grained tokens, where you can give specific permissions to a token on specific repositories. That's pretty great, and I'll probably move all this, they'll probably move entirely to this at some point in the future. But they also have the classic form of tokens, and that's what we're going to create here. Classic token, I'm going to generate a new token from up on the right, so let's generate a classic token. And it wants me to confirm my identity using my two-factor authentication. So I'll do that here over on the side. Okay, and then I'm introduced to a little web form here that I can fill out things. So I can say, this will be a demo token, September 2024. And you could set an expiration date for this or no expiration. Maybe I'll just have this one expire in 7 days. And then they have this whole section on scopes. A scope means sort of what realm of permissions do you want to grant it. And for these purposes, I'm just going to give it full scope, everything. This means that it can work with repositories, it can create packages for me, it can work with issues for me, it can do administrative tasks in my organizations or in my account. And then I'm going to generate the token. And at this point, you get a little green box up here at the top. This is the actual token. I can copy it here. And what you need to see and notice is this blue section that says, hey, we just created your token, but you will never be able to see it again within this web console. So they're displaying it to you once and only once. And if you refresh this page, you'll not see it. So I'm going to copy it. And at this point, I need this as an environment variable. And so I'm going to just nano in my home directory in bash, is a bash RC file, and I have a whole pile of exports and aliases and other features, and so I'm just going to export GitHub token. I'm going to wrap it in quotes, and I'm going to paste my token right in there. So you can call this whatever you want to. This is your environment, so you're in charge. It could be a GH token, or it could be, GH token, all one word. GH key, it doesn't matter. As long as you know what it is and you can use it later. I think this just makes good, clear sense to me. So there are no spaces, GitHub token equals, and then the quote marks and so on. And again, as usual, you don't have to name environment variables in all caps, but you can. That's kind of a tradition, so you know it when you see it. I'm going to save that file. I'm going to source that file. And then when I look at my environment, and if I grep for Git, for GitHub, there we go. I have my GitHub token. So this is exactly what I want. Great. So now let's go do the second step. Let's create a repository. I'll refresh this page and you see that I don't see it anymore. Let's create a repository in my personal account. Let's call it Showboat, a demo repository. And I'm going to make it public. I'm going to add a README file. README file is helpful because it's going to create an initial branch for me, a main branch. I don't need a gitignore file. I don't need a license here. So let's go ahead and create the repo. And there we go. I'm in a repository, basically an empty one. It's got just one file, readme.markdown, an MD file. And I would now like to work with this code in my local environment. So the way I do that is I click on Code, and go to local, because I want to develop locally. If I was using an SSH key for authentication, this is the address I would clone here. But I want to work with the HTTPS version. So I'm going to copy that URL. And notice it's a web address, and then it ends in .git, and that tells me that's a remote Git repository up in GitHub. So I've copied that, and now I'm going to go down, and I'm in a sandbox, which is sort of a folder where I have a bunch of things I can throw away. I'm going to say git clone, and then I'm going to paste that address. And the one trick I want to do before I hit return is I want to come back to the beginning of the address, and I'm going to say GitHub token at. So I'm going to call that environment variable that we created above, GitHub token, and I'm going to put an @ sign. So this really, in effect, looks like an email address. This is a user@host.com sort of format. And really the proper syntax would be my username : but honestly, that doesn't matter. They automatically see what the token is and what account that's associated with, and it authenticates me to this service remotely, and it's going to store it in my credentials. So I'll hit return. It clones Showboat locally here on my laptop, and I'm going to just cd into it. And if I list everything, you'll see I only have two things. One is I have this README file that we saw over in the repo itself. So that's kind of the real contents of it. And then a local little hidden .git directory. And this is where my local configuration for the Git repo is, where I can customize things and so on. And if I look, in fact, inside of the Git folder, there's a config file. And look, the remote origin is a URL. And here is actually my token has been replaced, string replaced, inside of the address. So it knows where things are at. It's tracking that permission right within the remote URL. So let's clear that, list it, and at this point I could just, I could echo, here is some data, and I put that into file1.txt. Let's just say I'm going to work on my code for a little bit. Let's imagine these are Python files or whatever, and I have 3 of them. So I've cloned the repository. I have my permissions all set up. And so the idea of this is that I'm going to work on my code. I'm going to work on my project and develop some. And I want to track my changes slowly over time. And the way we do that is, obviously, the first thing is you're just working with your code and adding files, changing contents here and there, dropping in functions and classes, and adding packages and libraries and so on. At some point, when I kind of made some progress, I want to store this in Git. I want to track it. And I want to push those changes back to GitHub so that maybe I'm sharing them with my colleagues, or maybe so that I just, protect myself and I'm going to back up kind of what I've done. And so the way I do that is I just say this one command, git status. Hey, Git, what is the status of this repository, of this particular project? And it's going to say, oh, you have untracked files, file 1, file 2, file 3. I've not tracked these yet. And so I could say git add file1.txt, and I could say file2.txt and file3.txt. That's great. I could do them one by one if I'd like. So I could always choose exactly what files I'd like to add and commit and so on. There's a shorter syntax, though. If I'd like to just add everything that I've changed, I can just say dot. And remember, that dot means everything in this directory and below it, or recursively below it. So I'm going to git add, and now if I say git status, what do I have? It says, okay, you don't have anything more to add, but now you have changes that need to be committed. These 3 new files need to be committed. And the commit is really an irreversible, irrevocable addition to the repository, a change, a difference. Maybe you've removed files, and that's the change. Maybe you've added new lines to existing files, and that's the change. Or maybe you've added new files and folders and so on. So here we need to git commit, and a commit always needs a message. It needs some sort of meaningful message. And you don't want to just say something dumb like, made some changes. Like, that would be meaningless. But on the other hand, you can't write a paragraph here. So I'm going to say, added 3 files for demo. That's succinct enough. I've actually even seen some great LLM AI tools that will automatically sort of suggest a commit message for you. So I'm going to commit these with this one message. That's all I need. Git commit -m for the message, and then I wrap this in quotes. And I hit return. And at this point, I need to push these changes back up to GitHub. And GitHub is what we call the origin. This is this remote origin. And origin is just the name. Somebody decided to name that remote service. And this could be GitHub, it could be Bitbucket. There's other services out there that do this exact sort of thing. GitHub is just the most popular, the biggest. They have a lot of extra great features and so on. So what I need to do is this forward command, git push, because I want to push my changes, these committed changes, I want to push them to origin. I want to push them to origin. And we haven't talked about branches yet, and that'll be a different video, but we're on the main branch here, and I want to push my main branch back to the origin. So I do that, and I can see it's compressing, it's sending things. Here is the commit hash, and so on, and it worked successfully. It went. So if I flip over to the web browser now, and I refresh, you'll see here are my files, which is fantastic. That means my changes are here. It sees it. If I want to look at my list of commits, I can see here added 3 files for demo. I can go back and look at the code itself, look at what got changed. This history is always going to be there. Even if you join a project 3 years after it starts, you can go back in the full history and see every single commit. And again, you can, if there were multiple branches, you could select which branches. So that's getting changes added and committed and pushed from my local environment up to origin. What if somebody else did some work, maybe a colleague or a partner did some work and they added something? So let's just add a file here, and we'll call it added file.txt. Here are some contents. And we're going to just use the web GUI to kind of simulate this a little bit. We're going to commit these changes directly. So now our repository, our Showboat repository, has our 3 files, has our README, and it has this added file.txt. Well, what you'll notice when you flip back to the to your repo is it's not there. It doesn't automatically sync. This is not like Google Docs. And in fact, or Google Drive or whatever, it does not, that's exactly intentionally the model, is this doesn't automatically just sync things back and forth, because code is very, very tedious and has many, many potentials for conflicts and breaks and so on. And so you, the developer, are in charge of when you push changes up and when you pull changes back down. And you do that very intentionally. And so let's just do that same forward command, but let's do the reverse of it. This time we'll git pull origin main. So that means we're going to use git to pull the changes down from origin on the main branch. So we hit that, and it says, oh, I'm fast forwarding, I'm seeing one insertion, a file has been added. And now when I clear and I list, there is my added file.txt. One last thing, and then we'll call it a day on this video for basic functionality here, is I can always say git log, and I can see all the changes. So here was that initial commit when I made the repo. Here are the 3 files I added within the command line here. And then here's when I was in the web browser and I added a file using the web GUI. It added it there. There's a cleaner way I could do this. I could say git log 1 line, and it'll give me a nice succinct view of the same exact sort of thing. And I can always go back in time. I could actually check out any one of these commits and go look at it. You know, I could actually inhabit the code at that state in time and work with it if I needed to grab something or see how something was done in the past that got changed. Anyway, hope this helps. Thanks so much.